The first time Grant Keller looked afraid of me, we were sitting in a mediation room with 3 folders between us. One folder held my prenatal records. One held bank transfers he had sworn were routine. The third held a cream-colored envelope from a probate office in Seattle, addressed to an apartment I had not lived in for almost 9 years. Grant did not look at the baby's file. He did not look at the bank statements. He looked at that envelope, and the color left his face in a slow, quiet drain. That was when I understood something I should have understood weeks earlier. My husband had seen that envelope before I had. And everything he did to me after I told him I was pregnant was not panic. It was preparation. My name is Claire Monroe. For 7 years, I was married to Grant Keller, a man who could make cruelty sound like good judgment. He did not slam doors. He closed them carefully. He did not scream unless he had already decided the screaming would help him. He did not call me names. He used words like unstable, emotional, reactive, overwhelmed. Words that sounded like concern until you noticed how often they left you smaller. We lived in Raleigh, North Carolina, in a brick house with black shutters, a narrow front porch, and a maple tree that dropped red leaves into the gutters every October. It was the kind of house people described as solid, which became strange to me later, because nothing inside it was as solid as it looked. Grant worked in commercial lending for a regional bank. He spent his days deciding whether other people were financially trustworthy enough to be given money. I was a claims review manager for a medical equipment insurer. My job was boring to explain and strangely useful in real life. I compared records. I read timelines. I noticed when a form said one thing and a billing note said another. I knew how small contradictions became expensive when ignored. For years, I thought that skill belonged only to work. Then my marriage became a file. The week before I told Grant about the baby, I found a folded yellow sticky note in the trash beside his desk. 4 words. Written in his small square handwriting. Before the notice lands. At the time, I thought it had something to do with one of his bank clients. Grant was always dealing with notices. Loan notices. Default notices. Letters of intent. Appraisal deadlines. He wrote cryptic phrases on sticky notes and left them in jacket pockets, desk drawers, the cup holder of his car. I picked it up because it was stuck to the side of an empty coffee creamer carton. I remember smoothing it between my fingers, reading it twice, and feeling a faint uneasiness I could not place. Before the notice lands. I dropped it back into the trash. There are moments you forgive yourself for not understanding because you were not yet being allowed to know what they meant. That was one of mine. On the night I told Grant I was pregnant, I made lemon chicken because he liked it and because I still believed good news deserved a decent meal. I had bought a pair of tiny gray socks from Target on my lunch break. No dramatic onesie. No clever mug. No little box wrapped in ribbon. Just socks soft enough to fit in the palm of my hand, and the first ultrasound photo folded into a white envelope from the clinic. I was 10 weeks along. A small number that somehow already filled my whole body. Grant came home at 7:18. I remember the time because I had been watching the oven, waiting for the chicken to finish, trying not to rehearse what I would say. He walked in wearing his navy suit, loosened his tie, set his keys in the ceramic bowl by the door, and kissed the air beside my cheek. Not my cheek. Beside it. That had become one of our habits in the last year. I told myself he was tired. I told myself couples go through distant seasons. I told myself that if I demanded less, he would come back toward me on his own. People think denial feels like blindness. It does not. It feels like politeness. It feels like giving someone one more chance to be who you remember. We ate dinner. Or I tried to. Grant talked about a borrower who had overstated occupancy projections on a retail redevelopment. I remember nodding at the right places, feeling the envelope beside my plate like a small living thing. After he finished eating, I slid it across the table. He looked at it first, then at me. "What's this?" "Open it." He did not smile. That should have been the first thing. Grant was not an expressive man, but he smiled at surprises. He smiled at bonus checks, good wine, clients who chose his bank over another. He smiled when something confirmed the life he thought he deserved. He slid one finger under the flap and pulled out the photo. The kitchen went quiet. Not silent. The refrigerator hummed. The dishwasher clicked. Somewhere outside, a car passed through the wet street. But the room itself seemed to take one step back from us. Grant looked at the image for a long time. Too long. Not confused. Not emotional. Reading. Then he placed it carefully on the table, aligned with the edge of his plate. "Claire," he said, "I need you to be honest with me." I laughed once because I thought he was about to ask whether I had planned it, whether I had known for a while, whether I had been afraid to tell him. I had prepared for those versions of surprise. I had not prepared for his face. Flat. Controlled. Almost relieved. "Grant, I'm pregnant." "I understand what you're saying." "What I'm saying?" He leaned back from the table. "I'm saying I need you to be honest before this gets worse." "Before what gets worse?" He glanced toward the hallway, then back at me. His voice stayed level. "I don't believe this child is mine." A strange thing happened inside me. The words entered, but they did not land. They moved around like birds trapped in a room, hitting corners, unable to find a place to settle. I said, "What?" He did not repeat it immediately. He did something worse. He folded his napkin and set it beside his plate like dinner was over. "I've had concerns for a while." "Concerns about what?" "About you. About where your attention has been. About how honest you've been." I pushed my chair back. It scraped the floor louder than I meant it to. "Grant, I have never cheated on you." "I don't think you're thinking clearly right now." That phrase. He said it with such calm confidence that, for one dizzy second, I wondered if there was some piece of my own life I had failed to see. Some missing hour. Some message. Some behavior he had interpreted so badly that I had not noticed the shape of it. That was Grant's gift. He could make your own memory feel like a witness he had already cross-examined. I said, "You're accusing me of sleeping with someone else because I'm pregnant?" "I'm saying we need space until we know what's true." "We know what's true." "No, Claire. You know what you want to be true." He stood then. Not quickly. Not dramatically. He picked up his plate, carried it to the sink, rinsed it, and put it in the dishwasher. I remember that more clearly than anything. The running water. The plate tilted under his hand. The domestic neatness of a man destroying his marriage without leaving a mess. When he turned around, he said, "I think you should stay somewhere else tonight." I waited for him to take it back. He did not. "This is my house too," I said. "For tonight, don't make this harder than it has to be." "Harder for who?" His expression sharpened for half a second, then smoothed again. "For everyone." There was no everyone in that room. There was me. There was him. There was a grainy black and white picture of a child smaller than a plum lying on the kitchen table like evidence at the scene of a crime. I went upstairs because I did not know what else to do. My hands shook so badly that I packed badly. A pair of jeans. 2 shirts. 1 sweater. My toothbrush, but not my toothpaste. A phone charger, but not the wall plug. I forgot my prenatal vitamins. I forgot my laptop. I forgot the folder with my insurance cards and clinic paperwork. I forgot the gray socks. When I came back downstairs with a duffel bag, Grant was standing by the front door. He had my coat over his arm. That was when I understood this was not a fight. A fight has heat. A fight has movement. This had logistics. He opened the door. I stopped on the threshold and looked at him. Are you really doing this? His eyes dropped to my stomach and came back up. You are. I do not remember walking to the car. I remember the porch light. I remember wet maple leaves flattened against the driveway. I remember turning the key in the ignition and sitting there with both hands on the steering wheel while Grant closed the front door behind me. Not slammed. Closed. I drove for 20 minutes without deciding where to go. Raleigh is not a cruel city, but that night every street looked like it belonged to someone else. Restaurants glowed with people inside. Houses had lamps on in upstairs bedrooms. A woman in a red coat walked a golden retriever under bare trees. Life continued with humiliating confidence. I pulled into the parking lot of a closed dental office because it was well lit and empty. Then I did the first practical thing my mind could manage. I opened our banking app. The password did not work. At first, I thought I had typed it wrong. I typed it again slowly. Same error. Password changed. I tried the joint credit card app. Password changed. I tried our mortgage portal. Password changed. A chill moved through me that had nothing to do with February. Grant had not decided in the kitchen that I should leave. He had prepared for me to be unable to function after I did. I sat in that parking lot until almost midnight, calling myself stupid in a soft voice because no one else was there to say it. Stupid for letting him handle most of the accounts because he worked in banking. Stupid for letting convenience become dependence. Stupid for not keeping paper copies. Stupid for mistaking quiet control for competence. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Grant. Please do not come back to the house tonight. We both need to de-escalate. I hope you make a safe choice. I read it 3 times. A safe choice. Not are you safe? Not where are you? Not I'm sorry. A phrase built to look reasonable in a screenshot. I did not answer. Instead, I opened an old personal email account, the one I had before we married, the one with a password Grant did not know because it was embarrassingly tied to the name of my childhood dog. Then I forwarded the screenshot to myself. It was the first evidence I kept. I slept in the car for exactly 2 hours and 40 minutes. Not well. Not truly asleep. More like my body shut off in protest. I woke before dawn with a stiff neck, a dry mouth, and a line of gray light beginning behind the dental office roof. The first person I called was not my mother. That may sound strange, but my mother loved me loudly, and loud love was not what I needed yet. I needed someone who would not panic before I could think. I called Tessa Ward. Tessa and I had met 8 years earlier when we were both adjusters in the basement claims unit of a larger insurance company. She had a laugh that made people think she was unserious, which was a useful disguise because Tessa was one of the most exacting people I had ever known. She now managed compliance audits for a hospital network and lived alone in a townhouse near 5 Points with too many plants and an old orange cat named Walter. She answered on the second ring. Claire? I tried to say her name and failed. Her voice changed immediately. Where are you? Parking lot. Which one? Dental office off Glenwood. Stay there. Lock the doors. I'm coming. She did not ask what happened until I was sitting in her kitchen wrapped in one of her old cardigans with a mug of tea cooling between my hands. Walter the cat sniffed my duffel bag, disapproved of it, and left the room. Tessa stood by the counter in sweatpants and a coat thrown over her pajamas. Her hair was in a braid that had partly come undone. She looked angry in the controlled way of a person waiting for enough facts to aim properly. I told her everything. Not smoothly. Not in order. I told her about the ultrasound, the accusation, the passwords, the text. I told her I had left my clinic folder at the house. I told her I was 10 weeks pregnant and did not know what to do next. When I finished, she did not say what most people say. She did not say, maybe he was just scared. She did not say, there must be some misunderstanding. She did not say, you should talk when he calms down. She said, show me the text. I handed her my phone. She read it. Then she looked up. He wrote that for a third party. I stared at her. That sentence, she said, tapping the screen. I hope you make a safe choice. That is not a husband texting his pregnant wife after kicking her out. That is a man writing for a record. Something inside me, small and numb, opened one eye. A record for what? That's what we're going to find out. She pulled a yellow legal pad from a drawer and wrote the date at the top. February 12th. Then she wrote everything I remembered in order. Times. Words. Apps. Password changes. What I packed. What I left behind. When she wrote baby socks, my throat closed. Tessa noticed but did not soften. That was one of the things I loved about her. She knew sometimes sympathy makes people collapse. You need 3 things today, she said. A lawyer. Access to your documents. And a doctor. In that order unless you start bleeding or cramping, in which case doctor first. I nodded because nodding was easier than thinking. Do you know a family attorney? No. Do you know any attorney? I almost said no. Then I remembered a woman named Ruth Halpern, who had once represented one of our vendors in a contract dispute and later asked me to speak on a panel about insurance documentation. Ruth had given me her card and said, if you ever need someone who reads fine print for a living, call me. At the time, I thought she was joking. Tessa searched her name and found the firm. Halpern and Voss. Family law, civil litigation, estate disputes. Estate disputes meant nothing to me then. I called the office at 8:02 and left a message. At 8:19, Ruth called me back herself. By 10:30, I was sitting in a conference room downtown wearing Tessa's cardigan, yesterday's jeans, and the expression of a woman trying not to come apart in front of a stranger. Ruth was in her late 50s, with silver hair pulled into a low knot and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She had the kind of quiet presence that makes you lower your voice without being told to. Start with last night, she said. Then we'll go backward. So I did. She took notes. Not many. Just enough. When I told her the passwords had been changed, she wrote longer. When I showed her Grant's text, she asked me to email it to her while we sat there. Then she asked, whose name is on the house? Both of ours. Mortgage? Both. Bank accounts? Joint checking, joint savings, 2 joint credit cards. I have one personal account, but there's only about $600 in it. She did not react, but something in her stillness changed. Do you have access to the joint accounts through another method? Email confirmation? Printed statements? Maybe. At home. Do you believe he will let you enter the house voluntarily? I thought about Grant standing by the door with my coat already in his hands. No. Then we will not ask him informally. There was something deeply comforting about that sentence. We will not ask him informally. Not because it was aggressive. Because it assumed I had a right to something. Ruth explained things calmly. North Carolina equitable distribution. Marital home. Financial restraining orders. Emergency access to personal property. Documentation. No dramatic promises. No, we'll destroy him. Just procedure, which in that moment felt like oxygen. Then she asked the question that changed the shape of the day. Has anything unusual happened with mail, legal notices, business documents, inheritances, tax forms, anything like that? I almost said no. Then I remembered the sticky note. Before the notice lands. I told her about it, embarrassed by how small it sounded. Ruth did not look embarrassed. She looked alert. What notice? I don't know. Do you still have it? No. It was in the trash. At the house? Yes. She wrote that down. Any reason your husband would be expecting a notice related to you? Not that I know of. Former employer? Lawsuit? Insurance settlement? Estate? Estate. The word brushed something in my mind and disappeared. I said, no. I mean, I was married before, but that was years ago. Ruth looked up. Tell me about that. His name was Aaron Pike. I had not spoken his name out loud in months, maybe longer. Aaron had been my first husband, though the word husband had always felt too heavy for what we were. We married when I was 25 and he was 32. He was an engineer with a mind so clean and precise it could make you feel messy just by standing beside him. He was kind, but not easy. Brilliant, but not warm in the way I needed. I was ambitious, impatient, desperate to build a life that looked normal from the outside. We lasted 4 years. The divorce had been sad, not cruel. He moved to Seattle after a medical device company bought the patent portfolio he had helped develop. We exchanged 3 emails the first year after the divorce, then 1 holiday card, then nothing. Not because we hated each other. Because sometimes a closed door is not slammed. It is simply closed. Ruth asked, any children? No. Any shared property remaining? No. Any contact with his family? Not in years. Do you know whether he is alive? The question offended me for half a second. Then I realized I did not know the answer. I opened my mouth. Closed it. Ruth saw that. When did your husband start acting differently? She asked. I thought of Grant's late calls on the back porch. The way he started taking his laptop into the guest room at night. The sudden questions about Aaron. Not obvious questions. Careful ones. Didn't your ex work in medical tech? Did he ever sell that patent thing? What was his family like? Do you ever hear from him? At the time, I had mistaken them for jealousy, and part of me had been flattered in an exhausted way. After years of Grant treating me like furniture that paid half the mortgage, even jealousy felt like attention. I told Ruth. She leaned back in her chair. I'm not saying this is connected. But I want you to find out whether Aaron Pike is living, and whether any estate proceeding exists. Do not contact your husband about this. Do not mention it in writing to anyone connected to him. If you search, use a device he cannot access. I nodded. Then she said, and Claire, from this point forward, assume anything you send him may be read by a judge someday. That is not to frighten you. It is to protect you. When I left Ruth's office, the sun was bright enough to hurt my eyes. I sat in Tessa's car, because she had insisted on driving, and searched Aaron Pike with my old email logged into a browser Grant had never touched. The first result was a short obituary. Aaron Matthew Pike, 46, died unexpectedly on October 4 in Seattle, Washington. The world narrowed. I read it twice. Then a third time. Unexpectedly. Beloved son. Brother. Inventor. Quiet friend. Private service. There was a photo of him in a blue jacket, standing near water, older than I remembered but unmistakably Aaron. Same narrow face. Same serious eyes. Same awkward posture, as if he had never learned what to do with his hands in pictures. I felt grief, but not the grief of a wife. The grief of someone who once knew the sound of his keys in a bowl. The way he sharpened pencils with a pocket knife. The way he could spend 20 minutes adjusting a crooked picture frame and forget to eat lunch. Grief for a closed chapter that had been quietly removed from the shelf. Tessa watched me from the driver's seat. He died, I said. When? October. 4 months before Grant kicked me out. I kept scrolling. There were 2 business articles from years earlier. Aaron's company had sold a surgical navigation patent suite. No sale price disclosed. One article mentioned ongoing royalties. My stomach tightened. I found his sister, Miriam Pike, on a professional website. She was a pediatric physical therapist in Tacoma. I had met her maybe 6 times during my marriage to Aaron. She had been kind to me in the guarded way siblings are kind to spouses they are not sure will last. I stared at her contact page for a long time. Tessa said, "You don't have to do it right this second." "Yes," I said. "I think I do." I sent a short message. I said I was Claire Monroe, formerly Claire Pike, and that I had only just learned of Aaron's passing. I apologized for reaching out through her clinic page. I said I had reason to believe there might be a legal matter involving my name, and if she was comfortable, I would appreciate being pointed in the right direction. I expected no answer. Miriam called 11 minutes later. Her voice was older but familiar. "Claire?" "Yes." "Oh, thank God," she said. Not hello. Not how are you. Thank God. My hand tightened around the phone. "Miriam, I'm so sorry about Aaron. I didn't know." "We knew you didn't. That's part of why everyone has been worried." She paused. "Claire, the attorneys have been trying to reach you since November." I closed my eyes. Tessa put one hand on the steering wheel and sat very still. "What attorneys?" "The estate attorneys. Aaron named you in his trust. We assumed they had found you by now." The word trust moved through the car like cold air. "Miriam," I said slowly, "what exactly did Aaron leave me?" There was silence on the other end. Then she said, very quietly, "You really don't know?" "No. Claire, I don't know the exact structure. Aaron was private. But it is substantial. Very substantial. His attorney's name is Elliot Price. I'm going to send you the number. Call him today." I looked out through the windshield at people walking along the sidewalk carrying coffee, wearing sunglasses, living in a version of the world where a sentence could not split your life in 2. "Miriam," I asked, "did anyone contact you about me?" Another pause. "What do you mean?" "After Aaron died. Did anyone call asking whether I was named in anything?" Her silence answered before she did. "A woman called in December," she said. "She said she was helping update a family contact list for a memorial donation." It sounded strange, but not strange enough. She asked if Aaron had kept in touch with his former wife. I said I didn't know. Then she asked whether the estate attorneys had reached you. My pulse beat once, hard. "Did you get her name?" She said Marlene. For a moment, I heard nothing. Not the traffic. Not Tessa breathing beside me. Not Miriam asking if I was still there. Marlene Keller was Grant's mother. She had hosted Thanksgiving in pearls and orthopedic shoes. She sent thank you notes on thick stationery. She called waitresses sweetheart and tipped exactly 15%. She hugged me with both hands and always managed to make the hug feel like an inspection. "Marlene." I said, "Thank you, Miriam." "Claire," she said, "are you safe?" That was the first time anyone asked me the question correctly. I looked at Tessa. I looked at the legal pad on my lap. I looked at my phone with Ruth's number saved now under attorney. "I'm getting there," I said. Elliot Price's office put me through after 2 identity questions and 1 long hold. He had a careful voice. Not cold. careful. A voice shaped by years of saying important things in rooms where people misunderstood them on purpose. "Ms. Monroe," he said, "I am relieved to finally speak with you. You've been trying to reach me? Since early November. We sent notice to the address available through prior records, then through forwarding information provided in a database search. We also attempted phone contact, but the number on file was inactive. My number hasn't changed in 6 years." There was a pause. Paper shifted. "That concerns me." "It concerns me too," he explained slowly. Aaron had created a trust years earlier, revised it 14 months before his death, then revised it again in July. I was named as a primary beneficiary for a portion of royalty assets, investment holdings, and 2 real estate parcels. The number was not as clean as a movie line. It was not exactly 77 million. It was estimated between 68 and 82 million depending on valuation and liquidation schedule, with an initial distribution of roughly 6 million once identity verification and beneficiary acceptance were complete. I did not react the way people think they would react. I did not gasp. I did not cry. I did not feel rich. I felt physically far away from my body, as if I were listening to someone read weather conditions in a country I had never visited. Elliot kept talking. There were conditions. Not moral conditions. Procedural ones. I had to appear in person in Seattle within 60 days of formal verified contact. I had to confirm identity, sign beneficiary acceptance, and acknowledge that the assets would remain separately titled unless I intentionally commingled them. Because I was currently married, Elliot strongly recommended I coordinate with independent counsel before signing anything related to marital finances. "I have counsel," I said. "Good. Mr. Price, did anyone request information about my notice address?" Another silence. "I cannot disclose all internal estate communications without proper authorization," he said carefully. "But I can tell you we received 2 inquiries that raised concerns. One from a woman claiming to be a relative by marriage. One from a man who did not identify himself clearly and asked whether a spouse could accept notice on behalf of a beneficiary." My skin went cold. "When?" "The 1st in December. The 2nd in January. Grant had accused me in February. Before the notice lands." I understood then that I had not been thrown out because of the baby. The baby had made him move faster. Ruth filed emergency motions within 48 hours. The language was calm. The contents were not. Marital access. Account preservation. Prohibition against asset movement. Retrieval of personal property. Documentation of changed passwords. She also sent a letter to Grant's attorney, whom I had not known existed until his name appeared at the bottom of the response. Dane Whitlock. That was how I learned Grant had already hired counsel before he ever saw the ultrasound. I read the letter standing in Tessa's kitchen while Walter the cat batted at the drawstring of my borrowed sweatpants. My husband had a lawyer before I knew I needed one. It is difficult to explain what that does to a person. Betrayal is one thing. Preparation is another. Betrayal wounds the heart. Preparation rearranges your memories. You look back at ordinary moments and they turn their faces toward you. Grant asking if my old legal name still appeared on anything. Grant offering to clean up our shared filing cabinet. Grant saying my personal email was outdated and I should forward everything to our family account. Grant's mother asking at Christmas whether I had ever regretted divorcing Aaron, then laughing softly when I said no. "You're so practical," Marlene had said. I always admired that. At the time, I thought it was a compliment. Now I wondered if she had been measuring where to cut. When the deputy met us at the house so I could retrieve my belongings, Grant was not alone. Marlene was there, of course. Sitting at the kitchen island with a mug of tea she had not drunk, wearing a pale blue cardigan and the expression of a woman attending something unfortunate but necessary. Grant stood near the refrigerator with his arms crossed. He looked at Tessa first. "Really?" he said. "You brought an audience?" Tessa smiled politely. "Witness." His jaw moved. The deputy said, "Ma'am, collect your personal items. Keep it peaceful." Peaceful. I had learned that word was often used when one person had already done violence quietly and everyone else wanted the injured person not to make noise. I walked past Grant without touching him. The house smelled exactly the same. Lemon cleaner. Coffee. The faint woody scent of the candle Marlene always bought us because she thought my preferred candles smelled too young. My shoes were lined neatly by the door. The baby socks were still on the kitchen table. Someone had placed them there. Not thrown away. Not packed. Displayed. I stared at them for 1 second too long. Marlene noticed. "You forgot those," she said. Her voice was gentle enough to fool someone who had not been paying attention. I picked up the socks and put them in my coat pocket. Upstairs, my dresser drawers had been opened. Not emptied. Opened. My jewelry box sat slightly crooked. My desk drawers were not fully closed. The filing cabinet in the guest room had been rearranged. The folder with my passport, social security card, and birth certificate was still there, but the clinic folder was gone. I stood in front of the cabinet, feeling the air change around me. Tessa, beside me, said quietly, "What's missing?" "My prenatal paperwork." "Anything else?" I looked again. "Our marriage certificate copy." "My divorce decree from Aaron." Tessa's face hardened. I took photographs of the cabinet, the drawers, the missing folder space. Then I collected my documents, laptop, hard drive, 2 bags of clothes, medication, toiletries, and every envelope with my name on it I could find. When I came downstairs, Grant stepped into the hallway. "You're making this uglier than it needs to be." I looked at him properly for the first time since that night. He looked tired. Not destroyed. Not ashamed. Tired the way a man looks when an inconvenience has started requiring more meetings than expected. "You changed the bank passwords before I left the driveway," I said. His eyes flicked toward the deputy. "That's not accurate." "Then it'll be easy to prove." Marlene stood. "Claire, this is not the place." I turned to her. "No, I think this is exactly the place." Her expression did not move, but Grant's did. He was nervous around his mother's silence. I had seen that before and misunderstood it as respect. Marlene said, "You are pregnant, frightened, and not thinking clearly. No one blames you for reacting." There it was again. Not thinking clearly. I pulled my phone from my pocket and started recording. Ruth had explained the law to me that morning. She had also told me not to announce it unless necessary. Marlene's eyes dropped briefly to the phone. "I came for my things," I said. "I'm leaving with my things. Anything else can go through attorneys." Grant gave a short laugh. "Attorneys? That's where you want to take this?" "No," I said. "That's where you already took it." He looked away first. It was a small thing, but that day small things were all I had. 3 days later, I flew to Seattle. Tessa came with me because Ruth said it would be smart to have a witness and because Tessa said, "I want to see the office that scares your husband." The flight was early. I sat by the window and watched Raleigh shrink into gray morning clouds. I had not flown since before the pandemic. I had forgotten how strange it feels to be lifted away from a life that is still burning below you. In Seattle, rain clung to the windows of the taxi. Elliot Price's office was on the 22nd floor of a building with polished stone floors and elevators so quiet they felt expensive. His assistant offered water, coffee, tea, crackers. I accepted water and held the glass with both hands so no one would see them shake. Elliot was younger than I expected, maybe early 50s, black, tall, with a trimmed beard and a precise navy suit. He greeted me with professional warmth, then asked Tessa to wait in the reception area for the first part of identity verification. "We have to be careful," he said once we were alone. "I'm starting to appreciate careful." He smiled faintly. Aaron appreciated it too. The documents took hours. Identification, prior name verification, divorce records, tax forms, beneficiary acknowledgements, separate property advisements, trust summaries. Nothing happened quickly. Nothing felt like a miracle. Each page required a signature or initial or explanation. The money became less like a fantasy and more like a system of rooms I had to enter one locked door at a time. Then Elliot brought out a sealed envelope. "This was left for you personally," he said. My name was written on the front in Aaron's handwriting. Claire. Not Claire Pike. Not Claire Monroe. Just Claire. I did not open it immediately. I set my fingers on the envelope and remembered Aaron at 36, standing in the kitchen of our first apartment in Durham, trying to explain why he had reorganized the pantry by frequency of use. I had been annoyed. Then amused. Then sad, because I knew even then that he loved through systems and I needed someone who could sometimes love without improving the shelf. Elliot said, "You can read it privately." I nodded. In a small conference room with rain moving down the windows, I opened a letter from a man I had not seen in more than a decade. Claire. If this letter reached you, then my tendency to overprepare has finally become useful instead of irritating. I hope you are well. I hope your life became bigger than the version we tried to build together. There are many reasons I made this decision, but the simplest is the truest. You were the only person in my life who walked away without taking anything you were not entitled to. You could have fought me during the divorce. You could have asked for more. You did not. You said, "I don't want to be paid for a marriage that failed honestly." I disagreed with you at the time. I thought you were being sentimental. I think now you were being structurally honest. That was the phrase. Structurally honest. I stopped reading there because my vision blurred. Not with romantic longing. Not with regret. With the unbearable relief of being accurately remembered by someone who no longer needed anything from me. Grant had looked at my pregnancy and seen leverage. Aaron, from the other side of death, had looked at my character and seen something worth trusting. I finished the letter alone. Aaron wrote that the assets were not an apology and not a claim. He wrote that he had no desire to disrupt my life, only to return value to the person who had once refused to confuse value with possession. He wrote that if I had a family, he hoped this would protect it. If I did not, he hoped it would protect me. He ended with one sentence. Do not let anyone make you small enough to fit their fear. I folded the letter along its original creases and sat for a long time with it in my lap. When I returned to the main room, Elliot did not ask what it said. He reviewed the next steps. Funds would not be immediately available. There would be an initial distribution after verification cleared, likely 4 to 6 weeks. The majority would remain in trust structures and managed accounts. I would need North Carolina counsel to coordinate separate property protection. I should not deposit anything into a joint account. I should not sign marital agreements without review. I should assume anyone pressuring me to move quickly did not have my interests in mind. At that, I almost laughed. On the flight home, Tessa slept with her jacket folded under her chin. I stayed awake with Aaron's letter in my bag and one hand resting lightly over my stomach. For the first time since Grant's accusation, I spoke to the baby. Not out loud. Not exactly. I said, "I'm sorry the first big thing you heard was a lie." Then, after a while, I said, "I'm going to get better at telling the truth." Grant filed for legal separation 6 days after I returned. In his initial filing, he described me as having abruptly abandoned the marital residence during a period of emotional instability related to pregnancy. He requested exclusive use of the home to preserve calm, temporary control of marital accounts to prevent impulsive spending, and a paternity determination given legitimate questions concerning the timeline of conception. I read the filing in Ruth's office. There are documents that hurt more than shouting because they do not look angry. They look official. Abruptly abandoned. Emotional instability. Impulsive spending. Legitimate questions. Each phrase was a little machine built to replace reality. Ruth watched me read. She let me finish before speaking. Do you see what he's doing? He's making me look unstable. Yes. Because of the inheritance? Because of the inheritance, the house, the accounts, and the child. If he can create a record that you left voluntarily, that you are erratic, that paternity is uncertain, then he walks into every later negotiation with leverage. I looked down at the filing again. He knew I slept in my car. Yes. He made that happen. Ruth's voice softened, but only slightly. Yes. That was the moment I stopped wanting an apology. Until then, some humiliating part of me had still wanted Grant to appear in Tessa's living room, pale and ashamed, saying he had been frightened, saying he had made a terrible mistake, saying the baby had scared him because he did not know how to be a father. I had rehearsed forgiveness against my will. I had imagined the version of him I married fighting his way back through the version he had become. But the filing killed that. You do not describe your pregnant wife sleeping in a car as abandonment unless you are willing to benefit from the cold. Ruth filed a response with exhibits. Grant's text asking me not to return. Screenshots of password failures. Photos of the disturbed filing cabinet. Tessa's timeline. The deputy's access report. The first hint of the estate communication issue, carefully phrased. She also requested discovery. Grant's attorney objected to almost everything. Ruth smiled when she saw the objections. Good, she said. How is that good? People object hardest to the doors with something behind them. The next month was not cinematic. No one tells you that surviving betrayal involves a lot of sitting in offices under fluorescent lights, filling out forms while hungry. No one tells you how humiliating it is to explain to a receptionist that your insurance card may still be active but your spouse might have changed access. No one tells you that pregnancy nausea does not care whether your marriage is imploding. It arrives anyway, in grocery aisles and attorney parking lots and once, memorably, in the landscaping outside Ruth's building. I found a new obstetric practice. I bought prenatal vitamins. I opened a new checking account. I froze my credit. I changed every password I could think of. Tessa made me eat eggs when I wanted only toast. My mother cried when I finally told her, then got quiet in a way I had never heard from her before. I can come, she said. Not yet. Claire. Mom, please. If you come right now, I'll become your child. I need to stay myself. She understood, though I heard what it cost her. Grant did not contact me directly except about the house, and every message was polished. I hope you are taking care of yourself. I think we both need to avoid inflammatory language. I never intended for you to feel unsafe. We should focus on facts. Facts. The man had turned facts into a costume. Meanwhile, other messages began reaching me indirectly. A coworker named Elise asked, too casually, if I was taking time off because of stress. A woman from our neighborhood texted, hope you're getting the help you need. Grant's cousin sent a long message saying pregnancy hormones could make people misread situations and that Grant was heartbroken but trying to be mature. A neighbor I barely knew left a casserole on Tessa's porch with a note that said, no judgment, only prayers. No judgment. That phrase told me there had already been judgment. I did not answer any of them. I forwarded everything to Ruth. One Saturday, Tessa found me sitting at her dining table with my phone face down beside a bowl of soup I had not touched. "Eat," she said. "I'm not hungry." "You don't have to be hungry. You have to be pregnant." I picked up the spoon. She sat across from me and slid a printed sheet over the table. "What's this?" "A list of everyone who has contacted you with language that sounds like it came from Grant or Marlene." I looked at it. 12 names. Dates. Exact phrases. Emotional. Overwhelmed. Not herself. Needs help. Making this public. Poor Grant. Tessa had highlighted repeated words. I stared at them until the soup blurred. "I look crazy," I said. "No," she said. "They look coordinated." That was the gift Tessa gave me over and over. She refused to let me confuse being targeted with being defective. The first direct threat came 3 weeks after Seattle. It was not dramatic. It came in the form of a voicemail from an unknown number. A man's voice, smooth and southern, said, "Ms. Monroe, I don't believe we've met. I'm a friend of the Keller family. I would encourage you to consider whether continuing down this legal path is wise for someone in your profession. Medical insurance work involves trust. Employers tend to dislike messy public disputes, especially when there are questions about judgment. Take care." No name. No callback. Just enough menace to be deniable. I played it once. Then again. Then I sent it to Ruth. She called within 5 minutes. "Do not delete it." "I won't." "Any idea who it is?" "No." Grant's side just made a mistake. "Why?" "Because people who are calm do not send unnamed men to threaten pregnant women about their jobs." She filed a harassment motion and attached the voicemail transcript. Grant's attorney responded that Grant had no knowledge of any such call and remained concerned for Claire's well-being. That phrase again. Concern had become the wallpaper behind every threat. The second pressure came through my job. At the time, I was still employed full-time, though barely functioning. My supervisor, Martin, was a decent man with the emotional range of a desk lamp, which usually made him easy to work for. He liked records, not gossip. He believed any meeting could be improved by ending early. He called me into his office on a Thursday afternoon. There was a printed email on his desk. I knew before I sat down that something was wrong because Martin had closed his door. "Claire," he said, "I want to be very clear that you are not in trouble." That sentence rarely makes anyone feel better. He slid the paper toward me. The email had been sent to our general compliance inbox from a Proton mail address. No name. It said, "I believe one of your claims review managers, Claire Monroe, may be under significant emotional distress and involved in a serious domestic legal dispute. Given her access to sensitive medical records, you should confirm whether she remains fit to handle confidential patient information. I would hate for your company to face exposure because warning signs were ignored." I read it once. Then I read it again. My face went hot, then cold. Martin said HR received it too. Legal said we needed to document that we addressed it. Do you believe it? I believe someone wants us to. I looked up. That was the first kind thing Martin had ever said in his own language. "I'm pregnant," I said. "My husband and I are separating. He is trying to make me look unstable because of a financial issue. I have counsel. I can provide documentation if needed." Martin held up one hand. "I don't need details you don't want to share. I do need to ask whether you require accommodations, leave, schedule adjustments, or temporary reassignment. Are you taking me off files?" "No. Your work quality has not changed. Your case notes remain annoyingly thorough." I almost laughed and almost cried. Thank you. But Claire, he said, and his voice lowered, if more anonymous emails come, they may go above me. You need to tell your attorney. I will. I walked out of his office with the printed email folded in my hand, went to the restroom, locked myself in a stall, and breathed through my nose until the nausea passed. Then I took a picture of the email and sent it to Ruth. Her response came 2 minutes later. Bring the original if Martin will release it. This helps establish reputation interference. This helps. That was the terrible discipline of my new life. Every humiliation had to become useful. The third pressure came through my clinic. At my next prenatal appointment, the receptionist asked me whether I wanted to update my emergency contact. I already did, I said. She frowned at the screen. It shows a change request submitted 2 days ago to restore Grant Keller as primary contact. The room seemed to tilt. I did not submit that. Her fingers paused above the keyboard. Okay, she said carefully. Let me get the office manager. The office manager, a woman named Denise, took me into a small room usually used for insurance questions. There was a poster on the wall showing fetal development by week. Week 14 looked like a tiny person floating in a blue circle. I stared at it while Denise reviewed the portal log. The request had come through a patient access link sent to the family email address years earlier, before I removed it. The clinic had not processed it yet because the address on the request did not match the new contact verification. I'm very sorry, Denise said. Her face showed more real concern than Grant's had that night at the kitchen table. I need a copy of that request, I said. We have policies. My attorney can request it formally. But please flag my account. No changes without in-person ID verification. No information released to Grant Keller. No emergency contact changes through portal links. Denise nodded. We can do that. Then, because she was human, she said, Are you safe? There it was again. The question asked correctly. I am trying to be, I said. That evening, I sat at Tessa's table with 3 new documents. The anonymous HR email. The clinic emergency contact request. The old message from Grant saying, I hope you make a safe choice. Tessa poured herself wine and me sparkling water. He is trying to build the same story everywhere, she said. Yes. Work. Court. Doctors. Friends. Yes. So the real target is not the money. I looked at her. It's your credibility. I had known it, but hearing it aloud made something settle. Grant did not need everyone to hate me. He only needed everyone to hesitate before believing me. That was enough to make every next step harder. Then Marlene asked to see me. She did it through my mother, which was both clever and cruel. My mother called on a Tuesday evening and said Marlene had reached out, very upset, wanting woman-to-woman time to heal the family before lawyers ruined everything. I laughed so sharply my mother went silent. I'm sorry, I said. Not at you. Honey, do you want me to tell her no? No. Tell her she can email Ruth. She said lawyers make things cold. Mom, she helped put me in a car overnight. My mother inhaled. I had not said it that plainly before. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. I will tell her not to contact me again. But Marlene did not stop. She sent a handwritten note to Tessa's address. I had no idea how she got it. Claire. I know things have become painful and exaggerated. I am asking you to remember that this child deserves a family not built on bitterness. Grant is willing to forgive more than most men would. You have been through a shock, and I do not blame you for confusion. But there is still time to choose privacy, dignity, and stability. Please do not let outsiders profit from your fear. Marlene. Grant is willing to forgive. I sat with that line for a long time. Not apologize. Forgive. She had turned his accusation into my sin. Tessa read the note and said, "She writes like a church bulletin with a knife inside." Ruth read it and said, "Keep the envelope." The envelope had a postmark. The address label was printed, not handwritten. Later, that would matter. For a while, the story moved in documents. Discovery requests. Objections. Partial productions. Subpoenas. Bank records. Email logs. USPS records. Phone bills. Medical appointment confirmations. Ruth kept warning me that proof takes time. People imagine truth as one door opening. In reality, truth often comes as a set of mismatched keys and a hallway full of locked rooms. The first key was the bank. Grant had transferred $42,600 from joint savings into an account solely in his name at 10:04 p.m. the night I left the house. 10:04. His text telling me not to come back had been sent at 9:41. He had waited 23 minutes before moving the money. Not long enough to look thoughtful. Long enough to look deliberate. The second key was the clinic portal. My prenatal paperwork had been downloaded from our home IP address at 6:33 p.m. the evening before I told Grant. I stared at that timestamp until I stopped breathing normally. I had printed the ultrasound envelope at the clinic and hidden it in my work tote. Grant should not have known. But the clinic portal had sent an automatic appointment summary to the family email account because I had used it once years earlier for a billing issue and forgotten to remove it. Grant had seen the appointment summary before I told him. He had at least 24 hours to prepare his response. The third key was USPS. A forwarding request had been submitted online in late November for mail addressed to Claire Pike, my previous married name, from an old Durham apartment to a private mailbox rental in Cary. I had not submitted it. The request used my date of birth, last 4 digits of my social security number, and an email address I did not recognize. Ruth asked me if Grant knew those details. He had my social security number from tax returns. And your date of birth? Obviously. And access to old addresses? Yes. She looked grim. The mailbox rental? It was opened by a woman named Marlene A. Keller. For 10 seconds, I could not speak. Tessa, who had come with me to Ruth's office because that day I did not trust myself to drive afterward, said the words for me. She rented a box to catch Claire's mail? Ruth said, "That appears to be the allegation we are now in a position to make." The room seemed very quiet. All the air in my chest changed shape. Until that moment, part of me had still kept Marlene in a separate category. Manipulative, yes. Involved, yes. But still somehow motherly enough to be restrained by the ordinary lines people do not cross. A private mailbox changed that. A private mailbox meant time, identification, planning, errands, forms, a little key on a ring somewhere in her purse. A private mailbox meant she had made a physical place for my life to be diverted. That night I dreamed of envelopes piling up in a dark metal box, each one breathing softly, waiting for me. The estate notice had gone there. Elliot Price confirmed it once Ruth sent the formal request. The first notice addressed to Claire Pike had been returned through forwarding and signed for at the Cary mailbox location by M. Keller. A second letter sent to my current married name had been routed differently after database confusion. That one never reached me either. Elliot's office had grown concerned and paused distribution until they could verify contact. Grant and Marlene had not fully succeeded. But they had delayed me. And in that delay, Grant had tried to build a story. That was when Ruth said the word I had been avoiding. Fraud. She said it carefully. Not as drama. As a legal possibility. Mail interference. Misrepresentation. Marital asset dissipation. Attempted coercion. Harassment. False statements in family court filing. It does not mean every issue becomes criminal, she said. It does mean the judge will care. Will it matter? Yes. I looked at the documents spread on the conference table. Bank records. Postal records. Clinic logs. Grant's filing. Marlene's note. This is just paperwork, Grant had once said whenever I asked why he needed access to something. I almost smiled. It was just paperwork. That was the problem for him. The mediation was scheduled for April 9th. By then, I was 14 weeks pregnant, sick less often, sleeping more deeply, and no longer wearing Tessa's borrowed clothes. The initial estate distribution had not yet arrived, but the trust verification was complete. Elliot had coordinated with Ruth to establish separate property protections. I had enough borrowed strength around me to stand on my own feet most days. But the night before mediation, I sat on Tessa's bathroom floor and cried so hard I scared the cat. Not because I wanted Grant back. Because I remembered wanting him. That is a different grief. People talk a lot about betrayal making you hate someone. Sometimes it does. But before hatred there is a hallway full of smaller losses. The restaurant where he proposed. The first house key he handed you. The winter you both got the flu and slept on opposite ends of the couch under the same blanket. The way he used to warm my side of the bed with his feet and then deny he was doing it. Those things had been real. So had this. The fact that he had become dangerous did not mean he had always been false. That was one of the hardest truths to hold. I wanted a simpler story. I wanted to believe I had been fooled from day one. But life rarely gives you clean villains. Grant had loved me in some way once. Then fear, control, money, and his mother's voice had found the weak places in that love and widened them until nothing decent could pass through. Tessa sat on the edge of the tub and handed me toilet paper because we were out of tissues. You don't have to be made of steel tomorrow, she said. I know. No, I mean it. You can shake. You can cry afterward. You can hate every second. Just don't give them your signature on silence. I laughed through tears. That's very specific. It's my brand. The next morning, Ruth wore a charcoal suit and handed me a bottle of water before we entered the mediation room. Remember, she said. You are not there to convince them you are good. You are there to resolve legal issues from a position of fact. That sentence stayed with me. Not convince them I was good. I had spent so much of my marriage trying to be perceived correctly by people invested in misunderstanding me. Grant was already seated when we walked in. He wore a dark suit, white shirt, pale blue tie. The tie annoyed me because Marlene had bought it. I knew that because she bought him one every Easter. He looked thinner. Not ruined. Just less polished. His eyes flicked to my stomach and away. Marlene was not in the room. Legally, she had no place there. Emotionally, she sat in every chair. Dane Whitlock sat beside Grant. He was older than Ruth, with silver hair and an expensive pen. He nodded at us like we were all adults having a regrettable but manageable disagreement. The mediator began with the usual language about compromise, privacy, avoiding litigation expense, finding a path forward. I listened. I kept both hands in my lap. Ruth had told me not to stack papers, not to fidget, not because I needed to perform calm for Grant, but because my body deserved fewer things to do. Dane opened with Grant's proposal. Grant would agree to temporary support during pregnancy. He would agree to sell the marital home and split equity 50-50. He would agree not to contest separate property classification of any inheritance-related assets currently disclosed, provided I signed a confidentiality clause, withdrew harassment claims, waived any claim related to alleged mail irregularities, and agreed to a mutual statement that the separation arose from private marital differences. Private marital differences. I looked at Grant. He looked at the table. Ruth asked for a break after 7 minutes. In the private room, she said, he is offering you things he is unlikely to win the right to take, in exchange for you burying things that can hurt him. I know. Do you want to counter? No. She studied me. You're sure? I thought about the Carey mailbox. The clinic download. The text. The phrase emotional instability typed into a court filing. The baby socks left on the table like an exhibit. Yes. When we returned, Ruth declined the offer without counterproposal. Dane's face tightened. That is not productive. Ruth said, neither is intercepting mail. The room went still. Grant's head lifted. Ruth opened the first folder. Bank transfers. The second. USPS forwarding. The third. Clinic portal logs. Then she placed the cream-colored envelope on the table. Not a copy. The original estate notice Elliot's office had retrieved after formal inquiry. It had been forwarded, signed for, stored, then eventually returned during their internal investigation. My old name was visible through the address window. Claire Pike. Grant stared at it. That was the moment from the beginning. The moment when he forgot, for half a second, to look innocent. He did not look surprised by the envelope. He looked afraid of it. Ruth let the silence work. Then she said, Mr. Keller, before we continue discussing privacy, I think we should all be clear about what exactly you are trying to keep private. Dane objected in the vague way attorneys object in mediation when they cannot actually stop the room from understanding something. Grant said, I didn't know about that. His voice was too quick. Ruth did not answer him. She turned to Dane. We have a signed USPS record connected to Mrs. Keller. We have the rental agreement for the mailbox. We have the estate attorney's logs noting inquiries from both a female relative by marriage and an unidentified male asking about spousal acceptance of notice. We have Mr. Keller's financial transfers within 30 minutes of his text instructing my client not to return home. We have a family court filing characterizing her forced absence as abandonment. We have an anonymous email to her employer questioning her professional fitness. And we have evidence that her prenatal appointment was accessed from the marital home before the confrontation in question. No one spoke. I watched Grant watch the envelope. For years, I had watched him win arguments by staying calmer than other people. Now calm had abandoned him. Not dramatically. Just enough. His fingers pressed flat against the table. A pulse moved in his jaw. He said, my mother has nothing to do with this. It was the first time anyone had mentioned Marlene. Ruth leaned back slightly. I could feel the room notice. Dane turned toward Grant slowly, and in that small movement I understood he had not known everything. That was the first crack. Mediation did not resolve that day. But power shifted. Afterward, in the elevator, Ruth said, he just confirmed his fear. How? He protected his mother before anyone accused her in the room. I looked at the elevator doors, at our dim reflections. He always does, I said. 2 days later, Grant requested a private meeting. Ruth refused direct contact and offered a structured attorney-supervised call. Grant declined. Then Marlene came to Tessa's house. She arrived without warning on a Sunday afternoon, carrying a white bakery box tied with red string. I saw her through the front window and felt my whole body move into alertness. Not fear exactly. Readiness. Tessa was upstairs on a work call. I opened the door but kept the storm door locked. Marlene smiled as if we had arranged tea. Claire. You need to leave. Her smile trembled at the edges. I brought you something. From Hayes Barton Bakery. You always liked the almond cake. I had liked it once, 6 years earlier, And she had remembered because Marlene collected preferences the way other people collected keys. I'm not opening the door. Her eyes moved past me into the house. Are you alone? No. That was partly a lie. Tessa was there, but not immediately. Still, the word worked. Marlene's face shifted. I am not here to upset you. You are upsetting me. She lowered her voice. Then give me 5 minutes so this does not become uglier. I took out my phone and began recording before I opened the storm door. I did not invite her in. I stepped onto the small porch and closed the main door behind me. Marlene looked at the phone but did not comment. I know you think you found some grand conspiracy, she said. I found a mailbox. Her face tightened. It was to protect Grant. From my mail? From confusion, she said. From a situation you did not understand. My inheritance? Your former husband's money, she corrected. Money from a man you left. Money that has nothing to do with the family you chose. The family I chose locked me out. Grant made a mistake. No. Grant made a record. That landed. I saw it. She set the bakery box on the porch railing like she needed both hands free to remain reasonable. You are pregnant, she said. You are angry. You have lawyers filling your head with language that will follow this child for the rest of her life. Her. It was too early to know. We had not told anyone the sex because I did not know yet. I went still. Marlene saw that she had said something wrong. How do you know it's a girl? She blinked. I don't. It's just a way of speaking. No, I said. It isn't. The first genetic screening had been done the previous week. Results had gone to my clinic portal. I had not opened the fetal sex portion yet. I had wanted to wait until I felt ready. The result was in a sealed digital section. Grant had still been listed as emergency contact in one old clinic field before I corrected it. Had the notification gone to him? Had he opened it? Had he told her? Marlene said, Claire, don't make every small thing sinister. There it was. The old spell. Don't make this bigger than it is. Don't be emotional. Don't misunderstand. Don't notice. I stepped closer to her. You rented a mailbox in Cary to receive mail addressed to my old name. Her lips pressed together. You called Aaron's sister pretending to be part of a memorial contact list. She looked down the street. You or Grant accessed my prenatal records before I told him I was pregnant. Her eyes came back to mine. That is a serious accusation. It's a serious thing to do. For a moment, the pleasant Marlene disappeared. What remained was not a monster. That would have been easier. What remained was a 71-year-old woman who had spent her whole life believing that if she could name something first, she could control what it was. She said, You have no idea what a woman can do to a man when she suddenly has money. I stared at her. There it was. Not the full truth, but a true piece of it. You were afraid I'd leave him. I was afraid you'd ruin him. He ruined himself. Her face hardened. Grant built that house. Grant built your life. Grant gave you stability. I paid half the mortgage. You know what I mean. Yes, I said. I do. For the first time, I did. Marlene did not believe money should make me independent. She believed money should be managed by the person she had trained to manage everything. Her son. Her extension. Her proof that all her sacrifices had produced a man who could stand above other people. My inheritance had not tempted Grant by itself. It had threatened the hierarchy. If I had resources Grant could not approve, access, redirect, or explain, then the marriage no longer obeyed the architecture Marlene understood. She picked up the bakery box. Think carefully before you turn private pain into public record, she said. Courts do not make good families. No, I said. But records make honest ones. She looked at me with open dislike then. Not anger. Dislike. You were never this hard before. I was never this informed. She left without giving me the cake. Tessa came down halfway through the recording playback and stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. When Marlene's voice said, "You have no idea what a woman can do to a man when she suddenly has money," Tessa whistled softly. That's motive. Ruth agreed. Elliot agreed. The judge eventually agreed enough to order broader discovery. That was when Grant's version began unraveling faster than he could repair it. His laptop search history showed Aaron's name first searched on October 9th, 5 days after Aaron died. Then again October 12th. October 27th. November 3rd. November 14th. Searches for estate notice spouse beneficiary, separate property inheritance North Carolina, can husband accept legal notice for wife, paternity challenge pregnancy divorce. Paternity challenge pregnancy divorce. I read that line in Ruth's office and had to stand up. There is something uniquely violating about seeing your unborn child reduced to someone else's search strategy. Ruth asked if I needed a break. I said no, then sat down because my knees disagreed. Emails showed Grant had contacted Dane Whitlock in late January. Not after I told him. Before. A calendar invitation read initial consult, marital exposure. Marital exposure. That was me, apparently. One email from Grant to Dane was heavily redacted, but one line remained visible. If notice reaches her before separation, does that affect classification? Another email, forwarded from Grant to Marlene, had the subject line, timing. The body was short. We may need to move before she has counsel. If she receives the notice first, she'll be harder to reason with. Marlene replied. Then do not let her receive it first. I thought that would be the final reveal. It was not. It was bad enough. Clear enough. Ruth's face went very still when she read it. Dane tried to argue privilege. Ruth argued involvement of a third party in non-legal planning. The judge ordered more production. But the biggest reveal came from something Grant himself submitted. A timeline. He submitted it to support his claim that I had left voluntarily. It was labeled personal record of events. 2 pages, typed, dated, signed. According to Grant's timeline, I had become emotionally agitated around 8:30 p.m., refused to discuss paternity calmly, packed my bag voluntarily, and left at 9:15 while he asked her to remain until she felt safe. He stated he changed passwords later that night only after noticing unusual account access attempts. He stated he moved funds the following morning to preserve marital assets. It was the kind of document that looked persuasive until placed beside anything true. Ruth spread the timeline on the table beside the evidence. My clinic portal showed Grant accessed the pregnancy appointment summary the day before. His bank transfer was at 10:04 p.m., not the following morning. His own text at 9:41 asked me not to return. The house doorbell camera, which Grant apparently forgot uploaded to the cloud account still connected to my phone, showed me leaving at 9:27 with him handing me my coat and closing the door behind me. And then there was one more thing. At 9:32 p.m., 5 minutes after I left, the doorbell camera captured Marlene arriving at the house. She had not been there by coincidence the next day. She had come that night. Grant had called her immediately after putting me out. For 6 minutes, the doorbell camera recorded no audio, just video. Marlene stepping onto the porch. Grant opening the door. Her touching his arm. Both of them entering the house. At 10:04, the money moved. At 10:16, Grant sent Marlene a text. Done. That word became the center of the case. Done. Not she left. Not I'm scared. Not what do we do? Done. The deposition was scheduled in May. By then, I knew the baby was a girl because I had opened the screening results myself on a quiet morning with Tessa beside me and my mother on speakerphone. No one stole that moment from me in the end. I saw the word female in the clinic portal and cried harder than I expected. My mother cried too. Tessa pretended not to, then blamed allergies. I decided to name her Nora. Not after anyone. Just because the name felt like a lamp in a window. Grant found out through the attorneys. He sent a message saying he wished I had told him personally. I did not respond. Some messages deserve to become exhibits, not conversations. The deposition took place in Ruth's office. Grant arrived with Dane. Marlene had her own attorney by then, which told me more than any statement could have. I was not required to sit in for all of Grant's deposition, but Ruth said I could attend. I chose to. Not because I wanted to watch him suffer. Because I had spent years letting Grant define reality in rooms where I was present. I wanted to be present when reality stopped cooperating. Grant looked different that day. He had lost weight. His suit did not sit right at the shoulders. He smiled at me when he entered, a small sad smile meant to suggest maturity and regret. It almost worked. That was the frightening part. Charm does not disappear just because you finally know what it covers. Ruth began gently. Marriage date. Employment. Bank accounts. House. Pregnancy. Separation. Grant answered in careful sentences. I was concerned. I wanted space. I did not intend harm. I believed there were questions. I was trying to preserve stability. Then Ruth placed the personal record of events in front of him. Did you prepare this timeline? Yes. Did anyone assist you? No. Did you review any records before preparing it? I prepared it from memory. Your memory was that Ms. Monroe left the home voluntarily at 9:15 p.m.? Yes. Ruth slid the doorbell still across the table. Me on the porch. Coat in hand. Grant in the doorway. This timestamp is 9:27 p.m. Do you dispute the authenticity of the image? Dane objected. Grant answered anyway. No. Your memory was that you asked her to remain until she felt safe? Yes. Ruth slid over the text. Please do not come back to the house tonight. Is this your message? Grant swallowed. Yes. Sent 14 minutes after she left? Yes. Your memory was that the funds were moved the following morning? I may have been mistaken. Ruth placed the bank record down. Transferred at 10:04 p.m. that same night? Yes. Your memory was that you changed passwords after unusual account activity? Yes. Ruth placed the app security emails down. Password change initiated at 8:52 p.m., before Ms. Monroe left the residence? Grant's face changed. Not much. But enough. Dane leaned toward him. Take a moment. Grant took one. Ruth waited. Then she asked, Mr. Keller, what happened at 8:52 p.m. that caused you to change the banking password before your wife had left the house? I don't recall. That phrase had carried him through so many rooms. This time it sounded small. Ruth moved to the estate notice. When did you first become aware that Aaron Pike had died? I don't remember exactly. Was it before February 12th? Yes. Before January 1st? I believe so. Before November 15th? I'm not sure. She placed the search records down. October 9th? Dane objected. Ruth rephrased. Grant admitted searching Aaron's name. Why did you search him? Curiosity. About your wife's former husband 5 days after his death? I may have seen something online. What did you see? I don't recall. Ruth opened another folder. Did you ask whether a spouse could accept legal notice on behalf of a beneficiary? No. Elliot's call log entered the conversation. An unidentified male caller. Date. Time. Number. Grant's mobile number. Dane stopped the deposition for a private conference. When they returned, Grant looked less like a banker and more like a boy sitting outside a principal's office. Ruth asked one more question before the lunch break. Mr. Keller, when you told your wife you did not believe the child was yours, did you have any factual basis for that statement? He looked at me then. I had imagined that moment many times. In some versions, he looked sorry. In some, angry. In some, he finally broke and said, I was afraid. In real life, he looked trapped. That was all. He said, I had concerns. What facts? I had concerns. Name one fact. Silence. Name one person with whom you believed she had been unfaithful. Silence. Name one date, message, observation, or circumstance supporting your accusation. Dane said, asked, and answered. Ruth said, it has not been answered. Grant looked down. No, he said. No, what? No specific fact. There it was. Not an apology. Not justice. But a clean point of truth in a room built to avoid it. No specific fact. The prenatal DNA test came later, by agreement. It established what I already knew. Grant was Nora's biological father. When Ruth forwarded the result, I read it alone at Tessa's kitchen table. Probability of paternity, 99.9999%. I expected to feel vindicated. Instead, I felt tired. Proof is useful. It is also insulting when it confirms something that should never have been questioned. I printed one copy, put it in a folder, and wrote Nora on the tab. Not Grant. Nora. Because the document belonged to her truth more than his accusation. The second deposition was Marlene's. I did not attend. Ruth advised against it. She performs for you, she said. Let her perform for a transcript instead. So I stayed at Tessa's house and tried to work. I reviewed a batch of claims involving improperly coded wheelchair accessories, and every time I saw the word documentation, I almost laughed. Ruth called at 4:12. She denied intentional wrongdoing, Ruth said. Of course. She claimed the mailbox was open to help with family correspondence. Whose family? That became unclear. I leaned against Tessa's kitchen counter. Did she admit calling Miriam? She said she may have reached out to clarify memorial details. Memorial details. Yes. Ruth's voice changed slightly. But she made one significant mistake. What? She brought notes. Marlene brought notes to a deposition? Handwritten. In a folder. Her attorney did not know she had them. I closed my eyes. What was in them? Mostly dates. Some phrases. One page with talking points. Talking points for what? For how Grant should describe your behavior. The kitchen seemed to lengthen. Ruth continued. One phrase had been written twice. Make it about stability, not money. Stability. That was the word behind everything. Not morality. Not family. Not concern. Stability. Grant needed to look stable. I needed to look unstable. He needed to look practical. I needed to look emotional. He needed to look protective. I needed to look dangerous to my own child, my own job, my own money. And Marlene had written the script. Ruth said, there is also a line about the notice. I waited. Before the notice lands, she needs to already be out. The sticky note in Grant's trash came back to me so sharply that I sat down. Before the notice lands. Not a client deadline. Not a bank file. Me. I was the thing to be moved before the notice arrived. Ruth said, Claire? I'm here. This is ugly. But it is useful. Useful. Again. That was the terrible discipline. The temporary hearing happened 2 weeks later. I had never been in family court before. It was not like television. The hallway smelled like coffee, paper, and people trying not to cry. Couples sat apart from each other. Lawyers whispered. A man in a wrinkled shirt held a folder to his chest like it might float away. A woman near the elevators bounced a baby on one hip while staring at the floor. Grant stood with Dane near a window. Marlene was not there. But her absence did not feel like weakness. It felt strategic. Ruth and I sat on a wooden bench outside the courtroom. She reviewed the order of issues quietly. Exclusive use of home. Account preservation. Communication boundaries. Employer interference. Clinic privacy. Estate separation. I listened, then stopped listening when Nora moved. It was not a kick. Too early for that. More like a shift, a small internal pressure that made me place my hand over my stomach. Ruth paused. You okay? Yes, I said. She's just reminding me she's in the room. Inside, the judge was a woman named Marisol Vega. She had a calm face and did not waste words. That made me trust her more than I expected. Dane presented Grant as measured, hurt, confused by my sudden escalation, eager for privacy, worried about my stress level and the unborn child. Ruth presented documents. She did not dramatize them. She did not need to. The text. The bank transfer. The password change. The clinic access log. The USPS forwarding record. The employer email. The mailbox rental. The estate notice. The doorbell footage. The word done. Judge Vega listened. She asked questions so precise that Dane began answering more slowly. At one point, Dane said, Your Honor, my client's position is that Mrs. Monroe's emotional response has turned a private marital matter into a much larger conflict. Judge Vega looked down at the documents, then back at Dane. The record before me suggests the instability was manufactured around her, not by her. The room went quiet. I felt Ruth still beside me. Grant looked at the table. That sentence did not fix anything. It did not erase the night in the car. It did not restore my marriage or my trust or the weeks of nausea and fear. But it placed a weight on the correct side of the scale. The judge granted temporary exclusive use of the marital home to me once Grant vacated within 10 days. She ordered account preservation, prohibited direct contact except through counsel or approved channels, barred either party from contacting employers or medical providers regarding the other except through legal process, and acknowledged the estate trust assets as subject to separate property review pending final classification. Grant's request for exclusive control of the home was denied. His request to characterize my departure as abandonment was not adopted. Outside the courtroom, Grant approached me. Ruth stepped slightly forward. He stopped. His eyes moved from Ruth to me. This has gone too far, he said. It was the first direct sentence he had spoken to me in weeks. I looked at him and heard every version of that sentence he had ever said. You're making this harder. You're not thinking clearly. Don't make this public. This has gone too far. What he meant was always the same. Stop making consequences visible. I said, then you should have stopped earlier. His mouth tightened. For 1 second, the old Grant appeared. The one who could make the room feel like I had failed a test no one told me I was taking. Then Ruth said, all communication through counsel. Grant stepped back. And the old Grant disappeared again. Moving back into the house was not triumphant. It was strange. Grant had 10 days to vacate. I stayed with Tessa until then. When I returned, the house was clean in a way that felt hostile. Too clean. Surfaces wiped. Closets emptied of his clothes. His office cleared. The ceramic bowl by the door gone. He had taken it, though I bought it. Marlene's candle still sat on the entry table. I threw it away before I brought in my bags. Then I stood in the kitchen where he had looked at the ultrasound like evidence and tried to feel like the house belonged to me. I did not. Not yet. The baby socks were in a drawer. My laptop was on the dining table. The refrigerator hummed. The dishwasher clicked. The room remembered too much. That first night, I slept on the couch with every light downstairs left on. At 3 a.m., I woke to a noise and sat upright, heart racing. It was the ice maker. The next morning, Tessa arrived with coffee, a drill, and a box of new locks. Court order says you can change them? She asked. Yes. Good. She changed the back door lock badly. Then a locksmith came and fixed it. We laughed harder than the situation deserved because sometimes laughter is the only way your body proves it has not become a courtroom. My mother came that weekend. She cleaned without asking where anything went. She did not say Grant's name unless necessary. She brought soup, folded baby clothes, and one small framed picture of me at age 6 holding a blue umbrella. You always looked suspicious of rain, she said. I still am. She touched my hair once, then pretended she had lint to remove from my shoulder. That was how my mother loved when loud love would break me. The house began changing in small ways. The guest room became a temporary office because I could not work in Grant's old one. The dining room table filled with folders. Ruth's documents lived in one basket. Elliot's in another. Medical records in a third. I labeled everything because labels gave me the illusion of order, and sometimes an illusion is enough to get through a day. The first estate distribution cleared in June. The number looked unreal. I stared at it on the screen and felt nothing for almost a minute. Then I opened the drawer and took out Aaron's letter. Do not let anyone make you small enough to fit their fear. I read it once. Then I called Elliot and thanked him. Then I called Miriam and cried with her for a little while, not because of the money, but because Aaron had done one last careful thing and this time his carefulness had saved me. I used part of the distribution to secure independent medical coverage, pay legal retainers, and establish accounts Grant could not touch. Ruth and Elliot worked together with a financial advisor who spoke slowly and never once acted surprised when I asked basic questions. That mattered. When you have been controlled through expertise, safe expertise feels like kindness. I did not buy a car. I did not buy jewelry. I did not become the woman people imagine when they hear numbers like that. I bought a better filing cabinet. I bought nursery furniture. I paid Tessa back for every grocery delivery she had pretended not to track, though she complained so much I had to hide the check in her coffee table book about desert architecture. She found it 3 days later. You are unbearable, she said. You housed a pregnant fugitive. You were not a fugitive. I felt like one. She hugged me then, quickly, before either of us could make it sentimental. Settlement negotiations intensified after the temporary hearing. Grant's position changed. Not morally. Strategically. He no longer claimed I left voluntarily. He no longer pushed paternity uncertainty as strongly once the DNA testing was scheduled. He no longer pretended the estate was irrelevant. Now his side wanted global resolution. Global resolution is lawyer language for cleaning up every mess before one mess infects another. Ruth explained the proposals. Grant would give me the house if I assumed the mortgage and released him from related claims. Grant would repay the transferred funds. Grant would agree to classify Aaron's trust assets as separate property. Grant would accept a parenting schedule after birth. In exchange, I would drop claims related to male interference, employer contact, harassment, and third-party involvement. I would sign a confidentiality agreement. I would issue no statement disparaging Grant or his family. I would agree that both parties acted under stress. Both parties. That phrase nearly made me laugh. I said, no. Ruth did not look surprised. The money terms are improving, she said. I know. The confidentiality term is still the center. I know. Are you rejecting all confidentiality or only the current wording? All of it. She studied me. I'm not planning to talk about this publicly, I said. I'm not trying to ruin him. But I am not signing something that turns my silence into one more asset he gets to negotiate. Ruth nodded slowly. That is a clean position. Clean positions are expensive. I learned that too. Grant delayed. Dane objected. Marlene's attorney sent a letter accusing us of weaponizing a family misunderstanding. Ruth responded with the mailbox documents. The letter stopped. The prenatal DNA test came back. Probability of paternity, 99.9999%. Grant was Nora's father. I expected to feel vindicated. Instead, I felt tired. Proof is useful. It is also insulting when it confirms something that should never have been questioned. I printed one copy, put it in a folder, and wrote Nora on the tab. Not Grant. Nora. Because the document belonged to her truth more than his accusation. When Grant received the result, he sent a message through the parenting app, which we had begun using early by court order. I am glad this question is resolved. I hope we can move forward for our daughter. Our daughter. The phrase made me sit down. He had called her questionable when she was leverage. Now that science had removed that tool, she became ours. I typed 3 different responses. Deleted them all. Then I wrote. Future communication should remain focused on medical updates and logistics. Ruth said it was perfect. It did not feel perfect. It felt like chewing glass politely. The final settlement conference happened in July, when the heat had settled over Raleigh like a wet blanket and my ankles had begun swelling by late afternoon. Grant came alone with Dane. Marlene did not come. Her lawyer attended by phone for her separate civil matter. Ruth brought printed copies of every final term. I brought water, crackers, and a small paper fan my mother had given me because she said court buildings were always either freezing or designed by men who had never been pregnant. Grant looked at my stomach when I entered. For the first time, I saw something like grief on his face. Maybe because Nora was no longer an abstract legal risk. Maybe because I looked visibly pregnant now, unmistakably carrying the child he had tried to turn into a question. Maybe because the room contained too many facts for him to keep pretending he was the reasonable one. The mediator asked if we wanted to begin with property. Ruth said yes. The house. The accounts. The retirement assets. Legal fees. Trust classification. Parenting framework. Medical costs. Communication restrictions. Non-disparagement language limited only to statements made directly to the child when age-appropriate. No confidentiality. No mutual false narrative. Dane fought the no confidentiality term for 40 minutes. Ruth said, "My client will not agree to silence regarding documented conduct that affected her finances, medical privacy, employment, and access to legal notice." Dane said, "That creates reputational risk." Ruth said, "Conduct often does." Grant closed his eyes. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Not enough to save him from the consequences. But enough to remember he was human. That is another part revenge stories leave out. Sometimes the person who hurt you looks small at the end, and it does not make you happy. It makes the whole thing sadder. During a break, Grant asked to speak to me in the hallway. Ruth looked at me. I said, only with you present. So we stood by a vending machine that sold stale crackers and orange soda, the three of us arranged like a badly designed family portrait. Grant put his hands in his pockets. I know you won't believe me, he said, but I didn't think it would go this far. I looked at him. He seemed to expect that sentence to mean something. You rented my life out to your mother's mailbox, I said. He flinched. I didn't ask her to do that. Did you stop her? He looked away. There are answers people give by not having one. She thought she was helping, he said. No. She thought she was managing. His mouth tightened. She was scared. So was I. That stopped him. Not because he had not known. Because my fear had never been useful to his story. He said, I panicked when I found out about the money. No, I said. You planned when you found out about the money. You panicked when I found out you planned. Ruth stood beside me, silent. Grant's eyes moved to my stomach again. I want to be in her life. That will be decided through the parenting order. I'm still her father. Yes, I said. You are. And that is why what you did matters so much. His face changed then. Some defense moved in and failed to find a place to stand. I'm sorry, he said. There it was. The sentence I had wanted weeks earlier. It arrived too late and too small. Not because apologies become worthless after delay. They do not. But because this one was trying to step over too much wreckage without getting its shoes dirty. I said, I believe you are sorry that this is the consequence. He stared at me. I continued, I do not know if you are sorry for what you did to me. He did not answer. Ruth touched my elbow lightly. We went back into the room. The settlement was signed at 5:42 p.m. Grant relinquished any claim to Aaron's trust assets. The trust was formally acknowledged as my separate property. He repaid the joint funds with interest. He agreed to contribute toward my legal fees. I received the house through a structured buyout. The employer interference and mail claims were resolved without confidentiality. Marlene signed a sworn statement that she had not been authorized to receive my mail, had no legal right to act on my behalf, and would not contact me, my employer, my medical providers, my family, or my child except through future court-approved channels if any. She admitted no wrongdoing. But her signature sat beneath the truth. Sometimes that is enough. The divorce itself finalized later, on paper, without ceremony. Marriages begin with witnesses and flowers. They end with notarized signatures, email attachments, and someone reminding you to download a copy for your records. The day the final decree arrived, I was sitting in the nursery surrounded by half-assembled furniture. My mother had bought a crib that required more tools than any infant should legally be associated with. Tessa was on the floor reading instructions with open hostility. My phone pinged. Ruth, final decree entered. You are divorced. I read it twice. Then I set the phone on the carpet and picked up a tiny wooden peg from the crib hardware bag. Tessa looked up. It's done? Yes. My mother put one hand over her mouth. No one cheered. That would have felt wrong. Instead, Tessa said, good. Now help me figure out why this Swedish crib thinks we own a hex key shaped like a dental instrument. And somehow that was perfect. Nora was born in September during a thunderstorm. Labor was long, unglamorous, and nothing like the soft-focus birth stories people tell afterward. I cursed more than I expected. My mother held one hand. Tessa held the other. At one point I told a nurse I wanted to resign from the process entirely, and she said, "That's a common request." When Nora arrived, she did not cry immediately. There was a second, maybe two, where the room held its breath. Then she made a small furious sound, like she had been interrupted from important work. They placed her on my chest. She was warm, slippery, outraged, alive. I looked at her dark hair, her wrinkled forehead, her tiny mouth opening and closing, and I understood that love is not always a wave. Sometimes it is a door disappearing behind you. There is no going back because the room you were in no longer exists. Grant came to the hospital the next day. We had arranged it through the parenting app. 2 hours. My mother stayed in the room. Tessa stayed in the waiting area because she said if she had to look at him near the baby too soon, she could not promise her face would behave. Grant entered carrying a small stuffed rabbit and a gift bag. He looked nervous. Younger than I remembered. He stopped near the door until my mother said, "You can wash your hands there." He did. Then he approached the bassinet. Nora slept with both hands near her face. Grant looked at her for a long time. His eyes filled. I watched him carefully, because I no longer trusted tenderness just because it appeared. But I also refused to deny what was in front of me. He was moved. He was her father. Both things could be true alongside everything else. "She's beautiful," he said. "Yes." He glanced at me. "Claire." "No." He stopped. I kept my voice low because Nora was sleeping. "You can talk about Nora. Not us. Not here." Something crossed his face. Pain. Shame. Irritation. Maybe all three. He nodded. For the rest of the visit, he spoke softly to the baby. He touched her foot with one finger. He cried once and turned away so we would not see. I let him have that privacy, not because he deserved it from me, but because Nora might one day deserve a version of him not completely flattened by my anger. That is the part people do not cheer for in revenge stories. The aftermath is complicated. Grant did not vanish. He became a co-parent. A restricted, documented, carefully bounded co-parent. He followed the schedule because court orders gave him structure and because perhaps, in his limited way, he did love his daughter once she existed outside his sphere. Marlene requested access through Grant twice. I declined twice. Not emotionally. Not with speeches. No. Then, when she sent a letter to my house addressed to my granddaughter, Ruth sent one letter back. Marlene did not try again. I do not hate her every day. Hate is too intimate for every day. Most days, she is simply a name attached to a lesson I paid too much to learn. In October, I drove to Cary and stood outside the mailbox rental store. I do not know why I went. Ruth said I did not have to. Tessa offered to come, but I went alone. It was in a strip mall between a nail salon and a dry cleaner. The glass door had decals advertising shipping, copies, notary services, mailbox rentals. Ordinary things. Practical things. Inside, rows of small metal doors lined one wall. One of those boxes had held my future while my husband built a case that I was too unstable to receive it. I stood there for maybe 5 minutes. Then I went inside and mailed a package. Nothing dramatic. No confrontation. No demand to see records. We already had records. I mailed Miriam a framed copy of an old photograph I found in my files, Aaron standing beside a half-built bookshelf in our first apartment, smiling awkwardly because I had caught him mid-sentence. The clerk weighed it, printed postage, slid it across the counter. "Anything else today?" "No," I said. "That's all." On the way out, I looked once more at the metal mailboxes. Forwarded mail is still mail, I thought. A stolen notice is still a notice. A delayed truth is still the truth. The house changed slowly. Nora's bottles took over the kitchen counter. A folded stroller appeared by the door. My work files returned to the dining room table during naps. The maple tree dropped leaves into the gutters again, and this time I hired someone to clean them because I could afford to and because competence does not require doing every hard thing alone. I started consulting part-time first, then opened my own claims documentation practice. It sounds less glamorous than it felt. My name on the LLC paperwork. My name on the business account. My name on the office lease when I finally rented 2 small rooms above a dental practice downtown. The first day I unlocked that office, I thought of Grant handing me my coat at the door. Then I thought of myself turning a different key. There are reversals too quiet for thumbnails. But they are the ones that heal you. People sometimes ask whether Aaron's money made me free. The honest answer is yes and no. Money gave me options. It gave me attorneys, childcare, a house, medical security, time to breathe. I will never insult people struggling without those options by pretending money did not matter. But money did not teach me to stop explaining myself to people committed to benefiting from my confusion. That lesson came from the parking lot. From Tessa's legal pad. From Ruth's calm voice. From the clinic timestamp. From the cream-colored envelope. From the word done glowing on a screen like a confession too arrogant to hide. It came from understanding that my worth had never depended on Grant recognizing it. That recognition was not mine to earn. 1 year after the night he put me out, I opened the small safe in my office and placed 3 things inside. Aaron's letter. Nora's birth certificate. The original estate notice with the forwarding mark still visible across the envelope. I stood there longer than I needed to. The office was quiet except for the old radiator ticking under the window. Outside, traffic moved along the wet street. In the next room, Nora slept in her portable crib, one sock kicked off, one fist open beside her cheek. My phone lit up on the desk. A parenting app message from Grant. Running 10 minutes late for pickup tomorrow. Traffic near Durham. Sorry. I looked at it. No anger rose. No grief either. Just information. I typed, "Thanks for letting me know. Nora will be ready at 10:10. Then I set the phone face down. I closed the safe. I turned the key. And for the first time in a long time, the sound of a lock did not feel like being kept out. It felt like keeping something safe.